Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks very much for coming along to our webinar on energy costs over the winter months. I think we've still got a few people still arriving, but we'll get started. Thanks to those of you who've joined us and what probably feels like a topical session now that it's definitely feeling more wintry. Please do say hello to us in the chat and let us know who you are, where you're from. Give us a weather report so we can see the national picture. Have you got frost, ice, sunshine? What's it like where you are? But please do say hello in the chat. I'm very pleased to be joined by Kimberly and Emily from Utility Aid today, as well as my colleague Chiara, who are going to talk you through some of our hints and tips and things that you can do in your setting over the coming months. Some of them you might have started already, some of them might be some bright ideas for what's coming. We know that those of you who are working in these spaces are still facing huge challenges, huge costs, issues with buildings, issues with funding to make changes and updates and environmentally friendly updates and retrofits. So we really empathise that you have a lot on your plates. And that's why we wanted to give you something really practical and helpful about ways to look at your energy cost, your energy use, and give you some information and tips on things that you might be able to do. Hopefully some easy things, possibly some slightly bigger things for you to think about too. So I'm going to hand over now to Emily to have a chat to you from Utility Aid's perspective. Please do stick your questions in the chat if you've got them, but we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. I am recording this session so that we can share the presentations later, but I will stop the recording when we get to the Q&A session so that you don't have to worry too much that you're sharing the village secrets on a recorded forum. So yeah, I will hand over to Emily now and let her speak to you. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for having us today. And hello, everybody. I hope you've got lovely weather by you, like I've driven to Lincolnshire today. And it's been an interesting journey, to say the least, but we're here and it's been pretty on the way. So I hope you're all safe and enjoying the nice weather outdoors. Before I share my screen and take you through today's session, just wanted to give you a quick overview about what to expect from today's session. So we understand that at the moment it's a really difficult time for people for many different reasons when it comes to energy supplies and looking at how you can reduce your consumption this winter. So we're hoping that this session gives you some really helpful, useful tips that you can implement tomorrow, as early as tomorrow. And it will also give you, as Rachel alluded to, some like longer term things to think about. But any questions, please feel free to ask and put them in the chat. And without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Lovely, perfect. So a little bit about who we are, first of all. So anyone that doesn't know who Utility Aid are, we are the largest energy consultant for the not-for-profit sector. We offer a range of services to suit all sizes of buildings, including providing the right energy contract for your building, supporting you with energy supplier queries, looking at how you can plan your journey to net zero, and also how you can start the work of reporting on your carbon footprint and carrying out vital audits to your building to make differences to how much you're reporting on in terms of your carbon emissions and putting in place renewable technology. My name's Emily Berry. I'm the Partnership Manager at Utility Aid, and I work very closely with the team at SCVO, including the lovely Rachel, and looking at how we can support you better with advice and support. So today's agenda, as I discussed already, hopefully we can give you some useful insights and tips and things that you can take away. We're going to start the session off by having a quick overview of what's been going on in the energy markets. We're going to then move on to some energy saving tips and things to consider when it comes to utility bills and also reviewing your consumption. And also, how do you plan your journey to net zero? Where do you start and what are the tips taking place? So to start off with, I thought, it being this time in the morning, it'd be lovely for you all to look at this graph at this hour, but I'm not expecting you to necessarily understand all the differences on this graph. This is just to give you kind of like an overview of what the energy market's behaviour has been like. So we can see here oil, gas and electricity prices and how they have moved from January to October 24. It's been quite an interesting couple of months actually in the energy space. So the end of September marked an end to the UK's 142 history of coal-fired generation. We saw Ratcliffe Power Station close its furnaces for the last time. And this is really interesting time when we look at energy markets, because we're seeing a demise in coal, even though that made up 39% of electricity output as recently as 2012. So we're still experiencing the same problems that we have for a long time as a country, which is we do not have the storage to meet the demands. So this creates a lot of instability within the market. So when we're looking specifically at the UK, we're looking at how much capacity do we have to store energy. And if it got colder or we experienced some sort of change that we weren't expecting, would we have the backup space to be able to give people the supply that they needed? And at the moment, that's still a concern for the government and the national grid, because we do not have those things in place. So in terms of looking for the next couple of months, our advice is still the same. If you're up for renewal within the next 12 months, I always recommend to people to look at least 6 months before, because you're giving yourself enough time to make an informed decision with your colleagues and put yourself in a good place. There are a couple of other things to take into consideration as well when we look at geopolitical issues around the world and how those could possibly impact our prices. I think the main thing to take into consideration is if you give yourself enough time, you can monitor the markets and you can make a decision that works for you at a time that works for you. But at the moment, the basic problems are still the same. We do not have enough storage to meet the demand that we might have. So do bear that in mind. Which then takes us on to understanding your bills. So shockingly, around 20% of utility supplier bills are actually incorrect. And this is due to many different reasons, but the two sort of biggest reasons that we see organisations seeing discrepancies is either estimated readings or VAT and climate change levy charges being charged incorrectly on utility bills. So a couple of things that you could check into and have a look at today on your utility bills. Estimated readings is a really topical one at the moment. I'm sure a couple of you may have seen in a recent BBC article, I think it was, about smart meters and how they operate differently depending on where you are located geographically. So to bring it back down to basics with readings, suppliers legally only need to read your meter once every 2 years. So if you currently do not have a smart meter, or perhaps you do have one, but it's not working or you're experiencing problems, most likely your bill will be estimated. And in most cases, it will be overestimated. And the simple reason for this is that the supplier doesn't want to chase you for a catch-up bill. So they will most likely overestimate how you're consuming rather than underestimate. Simple thing to do if that is the case and you're experiencing problems with getting accurate data on your invoices is taking a meter reading either at the start of the month or the end of each month and keeping a clear record of what those are. Usually I recommend to organisations, if you can, to take a picture that's date stamped, just in case you need to use that at a later stage for evidence when you're sending these readings to suppliers. If they find that you are paying estimates and they are more than what you're actually paying, they will then reconcile your bill. So I would recommend, wherever possible, just checking on your invoices. Does it say estimated? Does it say actual? Or does it say C for customer reading? And that's a quick and easy way to see if you're being charged too much. Another area is VAT and climate change levy charges. So if you qualify for a reduced rate of VAT and your invoices are at the right rate of 5%, for example, then great. But there's a couple of things to take into consideration when it comes to VAT and climate change levy charge. The two charges are interlinked with each other. Whilst VAT is VAT and climate change levy is a government tax, the two are linked together, and they're linked together under something called de minimis threshold. So if, for example, you're an organisation and you've seen your VAT fluctuate over the last 12 months, that's probably because your de minimis threshold has increased since you've been in the property. And what we mean by this is that if you consume under a certain threshold, which I think off the top of my head is around 10,000 kilowatts as an example, then they will automatically see your property as a domestic property and reduce that to 5% and remove the climate change levy. However, if you haven't looked at if you actually qualify for a reduced rate, this will move and chop and change over time. So two things I would suggest to do. check your invoices first. Are you being charged the correct rate? And if you're not, are you experiencing changes? And that can all then be tied down to two things. You either need to speak to somebody about what rate you should be on. We do have contacts with our charity partner, Ethical Property Foundation, who'd be more than happy to help. And also another thing to take into consideration is any reductions you make in your energy consumption is going to help you with reducing these costs as well, your CCL charges and your VAT. So do bear that in mind when you're looking at your invoices. Another area to consider and look at in terms of how you can possibly look at reducing your utility bills is metering charges and the way you're being charged. Now, there are going to be a couple of things possibly coming into place next year that will make changes to how we see metering happening, but nobody 100% knows when that's coming into place yet. We will be sending everybody updates once we have more information. But for now, this applies to organisations who have a half-hourly meter. So a half-hourly meter looks like this on your invoice. So this here is your bottom line of your electricity supply. This is an MPAN, so meter point administration number. And this up here is your supply number. And these two numbers at the beginning are your meter profile indicators. So this tells us what kind of meter you have in place. If you have a 00 at the start, it means you've got a half-hourly supply. And if that is you, you will most likely have something called a meter operator agreement. So a meter operator agreement is basically a contract that is separate from your supply contract, and it covers the cost of running that meter, the maintenance, the cost of sending consumption data to your energy suppliers and to the grid. And it's a contract that's completely separate. Normally what happens is if you have this kind of meter, the supplier will complete a contract with you for your supply, and they'll automatically appoint a preferred supplier they have for the meter operator side. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky for customers, especially if you're taking over new buildings and new premises, and where you could be being charged incorrectly or more than what you need to. So if, for example, you have this kind of meter and you've being charged certain charges, you'll see things like capacity charges. Maybe some of you will see things like KVA charges, things like that. This is where you need to look into this information and see if you've got an active meter operator agreement in place. If that is the case, I would strongly suggest having a look and seeing if the charges are what you need them to be. I'll give you an example that hopefully will make a bit more sense. So we had recently a customer that came to us. They'd taken over a centre. They were using it for completely different needs going forwards. So it used to be a care home. They were taking it on and having it as an activity centre. So the day times that it's going to be open, the usage patterns, everything was going to be different. However, that meter still had the same pieces on it associated with the original user. So the maximum capacity charge, which is how much the supplier and the grid needs to keep aside for that customer to ensure when they hit maximum demand, it's there, was too high. The customer was never going to reach that in this new premises. So we looked at how we could reduce that for them and arrange a new meter operator agreement that actually serves their services a bit better. So for some organisations, they've seen savings of around 60%. So billing side, check that your VAT and climate change levy charges are correct. Check if your meter readings are being estimated or are actual. And finally, check your meter profiles. And if you have a half-hourly meter and you have any questions about meter operator agreements, please reach out to me and we can have a look into that for you and see if there's anything we can do to reduce that. So that's everything on the billing side of things. Now we're going to be looking at what you can do behavioural-wise to change the energy consumption patterns and hopefully make some savings along the way as well. So this section's all about energy saving tips. So when we talk about energy saving tips at Utility Aid, we often talk about creating a culture. And this step is actually really important. If you decide to make cuts to your energy consumption, you need to make sure that everybody that uses the building is on board. Try having organizational wide meetings to talk about different ideas, keep communicating about the differences you're making by people changing their behaviors and how much of an impact that's having both financially and also environmentally. Some organizations that we've worked with have deployed the use of energy champions under creating a culture, and that's been really beneficial because they've been able to kind of cascade the message and make sure everybody is doing what they promised they were going to do, but also bring up topics like, you know, temperature regulation and what's the optimum temperature for everyone. It just makes those conversations a little bit easier to have. And it also means that you can start reviewing how much of a success you're having and how much a reduction you're making as a team by making these changes. Another thing to look into is the use of AMR. And also when we talk about AMR, look at how you can add this to existing technologies that you have in your buildings. When we're talking about AMR, we're not necessarily talking about smart meter reading. We're talking about an automated meter reading device. So it's a little bit different. The main difference is this lets you review your consumption in both operational and non-operational times. And this gives you a very unique ability to look at how you could save money. Where are the peaks? Can you identify anything that looks out of the ordinary? So for example, if you're closed at night time, is there suddenly a big lift in how much you're consuming after 7 p.m? This gives you a unique ability to look at those areas and see if you can make any savings or reductions. Checking your energy tariff. It sounds like a really simple thing, but when I'm talking about energy tariff, I'm not talking about the bits that we discussed earlier, the billing part. I'm talking about in relation to your consumption and how you operate your organization. So if, for example, I have a hall and I have an energy contract that has a day rate, a night rate, maybe you're super lucky and you have an evening and weekend rate as well, just to make it a little bit more confusing. If that is you, this is something to consider. There'll be different times where it'll be cheaper to run different activities. So have a look on your contract. What's the cheapest time of day to have on your tariff? And look at your schedule, and does your schedule mirror the cheapest time to do things? So if, for example, you know you're going to have the heating on for a certain activity, it would make more sense to have that at the cheaper time of day to do that. And this ties back into your creating a culture. If you've already involved everybody in the understanding of what you're trying to achieve as an organization and how it's super important that you make these changes to keep these spaces open for people, then people can be a lot more amenable and understanding when you say we need to move this, you know, this time to this time because it'll be cheaper for us to run it at this time. So have a look at your invoices and see if there's a best time to have these things. The ghost of energy past. I know it's coming up to Christmas and people often think that I'm doing that just for my own fun and games, but I promise you I'm not. I'm talking about phantom energy. So phantom energy is used by equipment that's plugged in, but it's not in active use, and it is huge. If anybody has children, grandchildren, partners who play Xboxes, PlayStations, you can probably share in the pain that I know that Kimberly has a lot, my colleague on the call today, where you go into the living room and everyone's got everything sat on standby, even though they're not using it. That is creating a huge impact on your overall consumption. Because what we're talking about here is the base rate. So if you imagine it in the context of a hall or a community space, everything that's left on standby is your base load. And anything in addition to that, like you running your activities, people using the kitchen facilities, the bathrooms, everything else is on top of that. So if you can reduce that base load initially, that's going to have a massive impact on your overall costs. So small changes, again, tying back into the creating a culture, try having anything that people could easily leave on standby. So for example, computer peripherals, printers, monitors, all that kind of stuff. Try having that connected to power strips. So all people need to do is just click one switch. And the education piece that you're bringing in to create a culture will also support with that and bring everybody into an understanding that that's going to make it a lot easier to run your space. And controlling the temperature. Again, I realise this sounds like a simple thing, But everywhere we go, we see organisations that are having this struggle with, you know, heating costs, air conditioning costs in some places, ventilation issues. These can account for up to 60% of energy costs. They're helping you form that base load and kind of adding on to that. So think about setting your temperature controls correctly and also agreeing something together as a collective. So everybody understands how much it actually costs to put the heating on at this time and how much of an impact that is having on keeping the centre open. So a couple of little tips here. The Energy Saving Trust recommends heating your home between 18 to 21 degrees. So that can be something you can start off with to see how comfortable people feel about that. And by making small changes and thermostat adjustments, it can reduce your energy costs by a really large amount. So it's something really important to look into, and I'd highly recommend making the changes to do. So those are our energy tips to take away today and try and instill in your organisations and see what changes you can make collectively. The final bit that we wanted to talk about, and we get asked about a lot, and when I attended SCVO's Village Halls event earlier this year, this was quite a big topic, and a lot of people wanted to understand, well, how do I get started on my journey to net zero? What do I actually need to do, and what does that involve? So I'm going to try and attempt to tell you that in a really simple and easy way. So getting started, if you haven't started your journey to net zero, or you're not sure if you've done it in the right order, here's a little guide to hopefully help you. So first step is carbon footprint assessment. You can't do anything until you know how much carbon you're actually emitting. I know that SCVO have a great user-friendly guide online, don't you, Rachel, where people can calculate their own carbon footprint. So I'd recommend maybe starting there. And putting that in place. And that gives you a really good sort of starting point to look at what sources have you got currently in your organisation and how is that contributing to your overall carbon footprint. Once you've got that in place, and then need to start thinking about, okay, what changes can we make? But before you do this, you need to remember with your carbon footprint, it's not a one-time task. It's not something you do and then just forget about and leave. It's something that requires regular updates and changes to echo any progress you've made as an organisation, and to also give you a chance to celebrate them as well. You know, if you've made a huge change and you've reduced your carbon footprint, congratulations, let's celebrate it, let's talk about it. So it's something you need to look at least annually to see how the changes you're putting in place are having a positive impact. Once you've got your carbon footprint, and you've got that in place, and you're now looking at what stages do we need to do next, you then need to start thinking about scopes 1, 2, and 3. So a little bit of an explanation as to what those are. So scope 1, this covers all greenhouse gas emissions that you make directly. So for example, that would be like if you had a vehicle fleet, that's something you're directly having an impact on, or for running your boilers, etc. Practical stuff that you're making directly. Scope 2 is for emissions that an organisation makes indirectly. So like when the electricity or energy you buy for your organisation is heating and cooling your buildings is being produced on your behalf. This is where people get a little bit in a sticky situation sometimes, or not 100% sure. We got asked a lot earlier this year at the conference, what's a green supplier and how do I know if it's, you know, genuine, and what's the best thing to do? If you're looking at green suppliers and you're really struggling, or you want to simply know the difference between green and renewable, because there is a big difference between the two, more than happy to have a chat with you on a one-to-one basis. There are certain suppliers out there that offer truly green tariffs, but they also generate it themselves as well. And there are also suppliers out there that say they offer renewable, but if we're being technical about it, it probably wouldn't be seen as renewable in the true sense. So it's a really sticky situation. There's lots of helpful guides out there that you can use that rank the energy suppliers, so you can see clearly which ones are green, which ones are not. And I think that's a really important thing to mention at this stage, because a lot of people think they're purchasing something that says it's green, but actually in the grand scheme of things, it's not 100% true. So do feel free to get in touch with me and we can have discussions about that in more detail. Scope 3 is where a lot of people get a bit overwhelmed and think they need to tackle everything at once. And it kind of, in some cases, I've been told, put them off a little bit with taking it to the next stages. So this is where everything you're looking at is all emissions associated, not with the organisation itself, but the organisation is indirectly responsible for up and down its value chain. So, for example, if I was running an organisation and I was looking at where I was purchasing my goods from, like for things like pens, for example, or paper, or certain, if I was making, if I was a social enterprise and I was selling, you know, certain types of products, I would need to start looking at, okay, well, what's their journey to net zero? What does that look like? And that's that stage. I think the key thing to remember with net zero in your journey is just doing it in bite-sized chunks that's easier for you. So start off with your carbon footprint, check out the SCVO carbon calculator. It's super easy, useful tool to put in place. When you've done that, then start making a list of all the different categories and what you think falls into each one, and start looking at what's the low-hanging fruit, what's easy changes we can make. How can we make our staff more aware of how their actions are having an impact on how much we consume as an organisation? Start making small changes a bit at a time, and it won't seem so daunting. And then start planning when you want to get things done by. So look at targets. Is it actually achievable? How do we measure that? And start putting them basics into place over time. And before you know it, you'll be on your way and you'll be making better decisions about how you can not only reduce your carbon footprint, but also help you reduce your costs as well. And that, I believe, Rachel, is everything from me.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. I think that was really fascinating. I feel like I've come away with tips for my own life. I've flooded with guilt about all the things that are on standby in my house and thinking, how silly. So yeah, I thought that was really useful. I really hope that some of you have got some useful tips. I saw a comment in the chat already about someone saying, actually, we haven't looked at our bills for a long time, so that is worth doing, even if it is to reassure yourself that everything is in order. And as Emily's mentioned, there's lots of support that Utility Aid do offer. So please do get in touch, have a look. I'm sure we can share contact details as well so that people can do that. Please do have a think about your questions, but first I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Chiara, who's our Climate Development Officer, just to expand really on some of what Emily was saying about the support that SCVO offers. So while we don't offer a carbon calculator per se, we have a scorecard, which is a way of people assessing where they are now on climate, where they want to get to and how to make that possible. We know it's a really big ask sometimes, and we know that you're already being asked to do lots of different things, and trying to get that as a priority can be really tricky, but that's why we tried to make a tool that's supporting resources that can help you. So I'll pass you over to Chiara to tell you a bit more about that. I hope I've not stolen her thunder too much with my introduction there.
Lots of great scene setting. So thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Emily, as well, because you've teed up what I'm about to say really, really well. So hopefully it'll be some more hints and tips in a slightly kind of broader context, I guess. So for those that aren't aware of what the Growing Climate Confidence project's all about, so SCVO are leading on this, but it's very much a partnership project, and I'll go into who all the kind of partners are that are supporting it in a minute. But just as a sort of in a nutshell, what we're trying to do through the project is recognise that, you know, the third sector as an umbrella kind of needs support in that transition to net zero. And I think, as has been echoed already today in the conversation and also the chat, it can be kind of quite overwhelming as to how to actually just start the journey. And also recognising that the support landscape for kind of climate action, there's more and more stuff popping up, which again can be kind of overwhelming in itself. But really what we're trying to do through the Climate Confidence Project is just get people off the starting blocks. So really trying to find that kind of entry level way to have that conversation, and looking at how all of these kind of threads that we're pulling on today can tie into everyday actions that you're taking as an organisation, including kind of the running of your halls and spaces. So who's involved in the project? Well, we've got a range of intermediaries that are involved in supporting it. So everyone from Community Enterprise in Scotland, Development Trust Association Scotland, right through to Volunteer Scotland and things. And I'll not list them all out, but there's many partners that have fed into this through the kind of observations and reflections that they're hearing from their members as well. And I think
sorry to interrupt you, but I think your slides have frozen.
Oh, have they?
Sign of the weather.
Oh no. I'll maybe come out, I'll stop sharing and reshare. Hang on. That's just my rural internet perhaps playing up. Apologies for that. Just bear with me.
It wouldn't be a classic webinar without some kind
of no.
snag.
Let's see. Is that showing up again?
That's looking good. When you go.
Okay, please just shout if they freeze again and I'll try and share them in a different way. But the unique thing about this project, is what I was trying to say is we've got a really kind of strong connection with a range of funders that are funding the project. And what we're trying to do as well through the evidence that we're gathering through the tool that Rachel mentioned, which I'll go into a little bit more about what that's about, provides us again as SCVO being the sort of voice, an umbrella for the sector to kind of feedback, where are the hurdles, where are the sticking points, and maybe where are the opportunities to actually come together collectively to change things, as well as recognizing that there's things as individual organizations we can do, but actually there's maybe some bigger issues that actually require more of that kind of collective action. So again, echoing what Emily kind of set up, everyone needs a kind of plan that works for them. And again, what we try to do through the Growing Climate Confidence support is really think about how can we create things that are engaging and about learning, also about that emissions reduction piece, thinking about campaigning and social justice at the same time, and not also just, cutting our carbon emissions, but we've also got to deal with the locked-in change that's already there. So how do we think about adaptation? Or, we can refer to it as resilience. There's lots of different kind of ways to frame it, but critically dealing with that already embedded change and how might we adapt, not just our places, but actually even the way we kind of go about our services as well. And so just picking up on what Rachel kind of introduced around the Growing Climate Confidence scorecard, or we kind of termed it a checkup because people maybe thought scorecard was kind of too scary a term, but really what that gives you is an organizational snapshot. So it's not necessarily a direct carbon footprint, but it scores you essentially on a sort of high, medium and low scale in terms of where you're at across a range of themes. Because dealing with kind of climate action, there's lots of things that are interconnected. So what this kind of gives you is a picture in a very quick way. It's just a dynamic survey form that you kind of fill in, and it'll give you a kind of score against these 5 topics that are on the screen here. So engagement, buying and selling, travel, buildings and energy, and waste. And what you'll get at the end of it is that kind of score, and it's really just an indication. So this is about just starting that conversation. So whether you're kind of tabling that conversation at a board level, whether it's just an internal team discussion, there's lots of different ways that you can kind of use this as a sort of starting piece to look to changes that you can make. And off the back of completing the scorecard as well, you get some useful nudges via email that are tailored tips based on basically the score or the areas that you need improved on, that will just give you wee tips along the way about actions that you can take. And just out of interest, we've now had over 500 people or organisations complete the scorecard. And I just thought it'd be interesting to share today just, kind of where the overall aggregated results are sitting. So you can see here from the screen that engagement, that is where the kind of sector is doing the strongest in. But we have, when we look at kind of buildings and energy and travel, those are the kind of harder sticking points. So I think some of the tips that, Emily shared today have been super helpful for those that have buildings, because a lot of the people who are completing the scorecard as well are maybe in less of control. So there's always that kind of balancing piece, but we're always really keen to kind of understand the challenges so that we can relay that back to the funders, as I say, by having that sort of feedback loop. And we do recognise, we through the SCVO research tracker, we're starting to ask questions around climate resilience and just trying to galvanise a picture of that understanding across the sector. But I think some of the recent kind of data that came through from that was, volunteer organisations are still kind of struggling to see that it's going to have an impact on their organisation. But those that do believe it will have an impact also understand the need to build resilience. So really what we're trying to do is through this project provide some of what is being asked here, particularly through advice, guidance and staff training, but through the funding piece, having that kind of direct connection with funders. So what can we support or what offer can we give you today? We've got carbon reduction planning training. So kind of what Emily talked about around creating that plan. We've actually kind of got a workshop that we're working with an organisation called Small 99. And that's done in a really kind of interactive way so that you leave the session with a plan, understanding, you know, what are high impact measures for cutting your emissions, but also that understanding of easy to implement ones versus harder to implement ones. So you can make that sort of route map for yourself and tell your sustainability story. And then we've also got climate resilience training that we're doing with Sniffer, and that's more about thinking about that resilience piece. So that, you know, how might your organisation adapt to recognise the climate risks that it might face, or the risks that the changing climate might be putting forward for you. And we also have one-to-one support available through myself as a Climate Development Officer. So please do get in touch after this if there's anything you want to talk through in more detail, or if you want to find out more about the training, happy to go through that. So as I say, it's all about taking action. So with the scorecard, we were just trying to give people a picture of where they were at. And then these two training packages are really about trying to support organisations in the sector to actually then move into that taking action piece and not get too bogged down in the numbers, but actually really understanding where the sort of big rocks are that you can make a difference on, and then forming that sort of plan for the future. A few save the dates. So we've got the carbon reduction planning workshop coming up on the 25th of November, which is online. And we've also got one in Glasgow on the 10th of December. So there's still a couple of spots available in that. And we've also got resilience training running tomorrow, which is probably too short notice for anyone on this call today. But we will be running more into 2025. And then also just to save the date for the gathering, because there's lots of kind of good relevant information to this conversation that's coming through the programme there. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, but happy to take any questions as well.
Thanks, Chiara. That was really, really helpful. I'm going to turn off our recording now, so thanks all for participating in that. Probably get some loud voice.